Hey everybody, it's Overdrive editor Todd Dills here with a special edition of the Overdrive Radio podcast for you. With the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance's annual Brake Safety Week inspection initiative kicking off this week with stepped-up brake checks and inspections generally in jurisdictions across North America, we're looking back at a podcast from earlier in the year, February 2024 to be exact. The episode featured Wisconsin-headquartered owner-operator Warren McCurdy and a central point of view about what he feels the roadside inspection system was designed for that's, well, gotten a little off track with how states, the FMCSA, and some fleets are treating so-called safety scores derived from those inspections. As you're out hauling this week, if you get a quote-unquote assist from an inspector out there, take note of the approach he or she takes. Is it prevention of accidents that is the ultimate goal? For Warren McCurdy, his opening shot in the podcast pretty well sums up how he thinks about it. Here we go.
I think that these inspections are good. They should be preventative things because nobody wants to drive down the road with flat tires. You could go down the road with a brand new tire and have it go flat. I don't think we should be penalized for something that is not something that you did intentionally.
Today, owner-operator Warren McCurdy, whom you heard there talking about how federal and state truck inspections ought to work. Owner-operator McCurdy tells the story of how his business was thrown right up against the possibility of devastating consequences by a system of quote-unquote safety evaluation that does nothing to take into account that intentionality of which he spoke. I'm Todd Dills, and yes, I'm talking about the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's CSA Safety Measurement System, which scores carriers based on a violation look-back 2 years in the rear view. And internal to FMCSA Driver Safety Measurement System 2 looks at drivers on a 3-year timetable, assigning severity weights in the form of points to various violations, as it does in the Carrier Safety Measurement System. In owner-operator McCurdy's case, though he's grateful the Washington State Inspector saw what he himself couldn't possibly have detected at the very back of his then-empty flatbed trailer.
You're talking about the infamous flat tire.
That's right, though he's glad the officer alerted him to that tire. The subsequent inspection and the noted high-severity violation had other consequences that he just wasn't expecting, coming quite close to meaning the end of his lease with his longtime motor carrier. The podcast this week dives back into what's at issue in cases like these, where carriers subject to the severity weighting system for violations pass that on, too, with systems to hold drivers and owner-operators to a degree of accountability themselves, relying on the federal points system to assess and prevent damage to their own scores. Curdy's wife and longtime business partner, Susan, tried her hand at the data queue system in a vain attempt to contain the damage in this case by challenging the violation. But given the inspector was doing what he should have done here, alerting McCurdy to the problem tire on his trailer, conducting an inspection, and reporting the results into the federal system as required, there was really nothing DataQues was going to be able to help correct about the fundamental nature of the situation. More fundamentally, though, it's the very nature of the CSA scoring system that makes accountability problematic for owner-operator McCurdy here. Nobody indeed intends to run around with flat tires. With respect to any violation, McCurdy urged regulators to take a long, hard look at what they're holding carriers and drivers accountable for by scoring them as they do. He's determined, meanwhile, to do what he can to make a difference.
You find yourself sitting on the sidelines, griping about this and that and the other thing, and you hardly, and a lot of people do that, and I was just as guilty as anybody else.
After his recent experience, though, things are different.
But you come to a point where you realize that, hey, if somebody doesn't know it's broke, it's never going to get fixed.
On the other side of a break, we'll dive into McCurdy's half-decade history trucking, with an eye on eventual retirement later in the year. If, that is, he doesn't just buy a new truck. You'll see what I mean after this word from Overdrive Radio's sponsor.
Every season is diesel season, so power up yours with Howes. Poor quality fuel can wreak havoc on your engine even in the warmer months. Protect your diesel with Howe's diesel additives and lubricants. 100% alcohol-free and made with the highest quality ingredients, Howe's products will keep your diesel vehicles and equipment running strong all year long. Visit HowesProducts.com to find out which product you need today to keep your engine running like new tomorrow. Howe's. Tested, trusted, guaranteed.
And that's Howes, Howes, HowesProducts.com. Here's owner-operator Warren McCurdy with some of his very long history trucking as an owner-operator to start.
Well, my name is Warren McCurdy. My wife is Susan, and we're not a team, but we operate together. We live in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and we've always trucked out of here. We've been with a few different companies, but mainly we were with Landstar for 23 and a half years, and now we've been with Bennett Motor Express for the last 4. We took this winter off, and I've been out here long enough that I don't want to compete with winter anymore on the icy roads. We've been out here for about, all told, about 50 years. Went 3.6 million accident-free miles, and we probably will truck this coming summer and hang it up this fall.
Have you been thinking about this year as an retirement date for you for a long time, or is this kind of just a new decision that you've arrived at?
Well, it's kind of funny because we say we've retired 4 times, and it seems like every time we retire, then we turn around and buy a new truck. And so whenever we tell anybody around here that we're going to retire, why they ask, well, when's the new truck being delivered? But we think that this is going to be the last year. It's trucking is a lot different today than it was 40 years ago, 45 years ago.
You told me yesterday when we were talking that you guys are hauling now, I think it's 2019 Mack Anthem.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Tell me
Beautiful truck.
Yeah, it is. You sent me that picture of it. It is a beauty. And tell me about, just walk me through the equipment that you guys are running now and see what kind of freight you're hauling for Bennett.
I started trucking with a reefer, and I didn't really care for that all that much. And then I switched to a dry van, and these were as company drivers. And then that didn't appeal to me either. I didn't care for the dock people for the most part that we were dealing with, and kept on going and went with Anderson, and that's when we switched to flatbed, and I really liked that a lot better. The guys we were trucking with were a lot easier to get along with. And of course, back in those days, they were the teachers and I was the pupil, because being new to trucking, I had a lot to learn. And you learn from the old guys that are on the road. You ask questions, and that's how it went. And now, like I say, we were with Landstar for 23 and a half years. We made a lot of friends there, and we still haul Landstar freight, because freight between Bennett and Landstar, they haul is compatible, and they haul each another's freight, which is really nice, because we have some agents in both companies that like our operation and the way we deal with customers. And so occasionally we get a call from an agent that says this customer wants you to come and get their freight. And that's always nice to hear. What we haul a lot of transformers. Okay. We haul a lot of air conditioners. There's air conditioners within 75 miles of La Crosse. And we haul equipment, conveyors for a couple of companies, Freightliner cabs to dealers. And we get into some interesting freight once in a while. We hauled a couple of ocean-going buoys out of Alabama. They were going to Alaska, and we wanted them to let us deliver them, but they said, no, at Seattle, we got to put them on a boat and take them up there. But they're so huge, there was only 2 of them that fit on a 53-foot flatbed.
You guys have that Conestoga set up on the 53 footer, right?
That's what we have now. We had an open flat for quite a while, and then when the Conestoga started coming on the scene, why we went to looking at them, and the idea appealed because I found it harder to tarp, especially if you had machinery and machinery and different items like that are very hard on plastic tarps. Spend a lot of time repairing holes. And the idea of the Conestoga, also we were hauling a lot of stuff for Boeing and Lockheed Martin, and they don't like tarps touching their stuff. And the Conestogas work really well for that, and they like to see you come in with a Conestoga.
Come a long way since the days of the 300-pound single piece canvas tarp, right? We were talking a little bit about that yesterday.
Yeah, I as I think back on that, I don't know how I survived that. Of course, you always had to have them put up there with a forklift, and you had to get them rolled up so that you could, when you were up there, you had to get them rolled out so that they could, so that you could get them opened in the front the way they were supposed to be. If you didn't and you had to turn them around up there, it was pretty difficult.
Hey, when did you buy your first truck? Was that before or after you and Susan were together?
That was before.
Okay.
I had a truck probably, I believe in 1968. I bought a cab-over Mack from La Crosse, and that's when I was doing reefer work. But my first wife was a type 1 diabetic, and her health went downhill. So I put a driver in the truck for a while, and I went through 2 or 3 drivers. A couple of them weren't very honest. I finally got a good one, and he lasted and decided that he wanted to be home more with his wife. And I got up one morning, and the truck was parked in front of the house with a note on the steering wheel, fully loaded.
Oh, jeez.
So I had to deliver that, and we ended up selling that truck. And I did something for a little while because I couldn't be away from her.
Right.
I lost her at open heart surgery. I was single for 5 years, and my Susan only lived a block and a half away from our house when I was married to my first wife. And we ended up meeting at a singles club, and the rest, as they say, is history. We met for the first time on a dance floor because she likes to dance and I like to dance. And up until the last couple of years, there's not many dance halls around here anymore. So the dancing has kind of fell by the wayside.
Has she been on the truck with you continuously through the years?
I would say 99.9% of the time. I take a load to San Diego by myself, or I don't remember why she had to stay home.
No.
And then she was home when we bought a trailer, and she had to, because we had to move, and she was remodeling the inside of the trailer, so she was home while I was trucking. But we do much better with her on the truck because she does all of the logistic work. She gets the directions. She calls the customer. She calls the shipper and the receiver. She does all the phone calling with the agents. She operates the laptop. I don't do well with computers. And you can, loads come and go on the load board. So obviously I can't do it while I'm driving the truck, and she can. And that way it works out a lot better financially. And at that time, we were newly married, so we didn't want to be apart. We wanted to be together, so
sure, yeah.
It works much better. Yeah.
What year did you guys get married?
It'll be 35 years ago this coming June.
Here's a big congrats to the McCurdys in advance. I then asked Warren to tell the story that led us to this conversation to begin with. The infamous flat tire, indeed, and a severity weighting system and a safety measurement protocol that, to say the least, does not take into account a totality of the circumstances. and whether a driver could reasonably be expected to have discovered a violation prior to encountering it during inspection. The story starts in Portland, Oregon.
We were loaded and had Jubit's truck stop overnight due to deliver near the airport in Portland.
Okay.
And we did that. You do a pre-trip or a pre-trip inspection in the morning. Everything was fine. We unloaded, and we had a load to pick up the next morning in Spokane, so we immediately headed in that direction. When you leave Portland, you go about 35, 40 miles, and you go through a Oregon scale. And we went through an Oregon scale, and nobody said a word. So I assume that tire was not flat at that time because it was fairly obvious. I mean, it was off the rim.
Quick FYI here. The eventual flat in question, discovered later, was on the inside wheel of a pair of duals on the driver's side at the very back of the 53-foot flatbed Conestoga. As Warren McCurdy notes here, when he crossed that Oregon scale, he went through it without a problem.
Maybe it went flat after that because they didn't say anything. And then we never stopped for anything. And when we got to Umatilla, of course, we got on 395 going north and crossed the river into the Washington scale where we got the red light, and the officer told us we had a flat tire, which resulted in an inspection of the truck, which they did. They also found a running light that had went out. This resulted in a total of 16 points, not 16 points, 12 points.
That's referring to the severity weighting of violations in the safety measurement system. In this case, that's 8 for the tire, 2 for the lamp, plus another 2 for the out-of-service condition of the flat tire.
Under the rules of the FMCSA, that's tripled. So now we have 36 points.
Violations in both motor carrier and driver safety measurement systems initially are tripled to account for their recency. They carry less weight over time. In most of what follows, McCurdy references the driver system, where a tripling of the violation's weight falls to a doubling after year 1 of that violation appearing on the record, then to just standard weight after the second year.
Got the tire put on, new tire, about $660, and proceeded to Ritzville, where we spent the night, and went in to get loaded the next day. And then our problems really started, because once we got loaded, the truck wouldn't start.
Right.
And everything went downhill from there. We had to get a wrecker, hauled us over to the Mack dealer, sat for 2.5 days to get it fixed, and proceeded.
So that was unrelated to the flat tire, but nonetheless, it's like when it rains, it pours, right? That was something to do with the ignition and or the electrical?
Yeah, we had a short in the wire.
Okay.
When we got out of there, Bennett called us and informed me that had I got 42 points, I would have been terminated. As I mentioned before, I've at this point I've driven over 3 million miles accident-free and claim-free. I hadn't had any points for at least 25 years or so. And I can't remember the last ticket, but apparently none of that counts for anybody. It's only that flat tire that counts. And that's what our ongoing objection is.
There's not a huge amount of miles and time between leaving the Jubich truck stop and getting to that scale in Washington. From
Portland to Umatilla, it's about, I'll give or take 160 miles. And then it's about 3 miles to the station. And from that point, it's 125 to Spokane.
Somewhere you picked something up in that tire, because that thing, there was nothing wrong with that morning. And yet, the officer the inspector at the scale house in Washington did exactly what they're there for, which is to highlight okay, you got a problem that you don't know about yet. But because of that, you're the one that takes the penalty, and essentially, and no one else. The carrier does too, for that matter, that you're hauling for. I mean, I guess that's why they put those kinds of stipulations in their contracts to sort of incentivize folks to do all the work necessary to avoid any violations, because they're getting assessed for the same thing, obviously. But it is a system that it penalizes. It seems to penalize you for things that you have no control over, essentially.
None, because we have no representation on the FMCSA, and they set the rules. And
you've spent a good bit of time talking to your state representatives, and then also, I believe, working with the association that you're a member of. I think it's Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Talk a little bit about that, what you've done in terms of those conversations, and kind of how you've sort of tried to take a little bit more of an advocate role in this arena.
You find yourself sitting on the sidelines, griping about this and that and the other thing, and you hardly, and a lot of people do that, and I was just as guilty as anybody else. But you come to a point where you realize that, hey, if somebody doesn't know it's broke, it's never going to get fixed. And so that's what we got these guys for. And they have offices right here in La Crosse. And we did meet with the actual local assemblyman from the state of Wisconsin on a different subject. Okay. But the federal people, we have only met with their office help. We haven't met with the actual representatives yet. But the people we've met with have been very receptive to what we've been telling them. And I have been filling out an application for alternate board of directors member with the OIDA, and I don't know whether I'll be voted in or not, but if I am, well, that gives me another place to vocalize and support them, and maybe will help meeting with my local people.
McCurdy then referenced rulemakings in process to require speed limiters, automatic braking systems, and side under-rad guards as particularly important to engage on, to at least limit the damage of any implementation, if not get the rules abandoned altogether. Personally, he felt most strongly about the adverse safety implications of automatic braking systems. He worried too about widespread speed limiting's potential impact on highway traffic flow and subsequent road rage incidents. With side under-ride guards, well, that would increase the cost of equipment unnecessarily, he felt, with little real benefit on the safety front. As for that trailer tire, again, inside tire of a dual pair under an empty flatbed, with the tire flat to the point of being off the rim but not noticeable from the cab of the truck, Curdy said. He felt
it could have went several hundred miles without, until I got loaded. It wouldn't have been in trouble, or it wouldn't have caused any trouble. No.
Carrier and driver being held accountable in the CSA SMS with all those points associated with the flat violation might be made a little more reasonable with the new weighting system that FMCSA proposed for the carrier CSA SMS. Violations in general under the new system are weighted more evenly there, yet the agency didn't concern itself with those changes when it comes to the driver safety measurement system. That SMS isn't available to the public and operates for enforcement purposes entirely in the background. Curdy's example, though, makes clear some trucking companies have used it and those severity weights as indicators of performance, with tie-ins with their lease contracts.
I think the terminology is wrong. A violation is something you do intentionally. I mean, if you go through a red light, that's a violation.
Right.
You've done more or less done that intentionally. If you go 75 miles an hour in a 65 mile an hour zone, you know it. That's a violation. I didn't know that tire was flat. I don't know that a light burned out. If they're all lit when I look at them and then it goes out in between, how
you're not going to see this in your mirror. Yeah, you're not going to see that in your mirror, right?
Right. Right. I think that these inspections are good. They should be preventative things, because nobody wants to drive down the road with flat tire. You could go down the road with a brand new tire and have it go flat. I don't think we should be penalized for something that is not something that you did intentionally.
that would require a kind of a totality of the circumstances look at every violation, and everybody just they want the easiest way forward, right? So it's just like, okay, let's put a number on every single violation and just call it a day, right? But these things have real consequences.
I've said before that members of the FMCSA don't understand. They wouldn't know one truck from another, but I think standardization would help. I have been out east and went through a scale, and the guy said, stopped me, and he said, I think you got a headlight out. I said, really? He said, yep. He said, that's when we had bulbs and we could change them. He said, have you got a new bulb with you? And I said, yeah. He said, park it in a new bulb, put in a new bulb, and have a nice day. That was the end of it. That was a preventative situation, and to me was handled right.
I mean, as was the inspection out in Washington, right?
The officer was very professional. He was very professional. He was very civil. He wasn't condescending at all. He was doing his job the way he was supposed to do it, and he did what he was supposed to do. You cannot let a truck go through there with a flat tire like that, and I had no problems with that. And we had a discussion with the scale master at one point, 3 days after that, and I told him, I said the officer was very professional. He should be commented on that. And it's not them, it's the system.
A system in which points for the violations follow both McCurdy and his leasing carrier around now for subsequent years, as if they truly meant something with respect to safety. McCurdy thinks the answer to these issues, as suggested earlier, is through engagement, and really getting some representation of trucking industry members with hard-won experience in place in the bodies that write the rules and design the systems.
In order to get a more fair system in place, I mean, I know that Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration and all the trucking associations are in constant communication with each other, and yet you don't see career or former career truck drivers often, actually taking positions within the agency on a full-time basis. There's probably a reason for that, because they're career truck drivers and or owner-operators for a reason. They love doing it. But, someone like yourself, who's kind of, has an eye on the end of a trucking career, could be called upon to, participate in that system, give advice. Would you see yourself taking a full-time position as an advisor and or someone working with the FMCSA in Wisconsin, for instance, because they all have division offices, obviously?
I told somebody, in fact, when we met with Van Orden's representative last week, I said I'd be happy to testify. I wouldn't want to live in D.C. or out east, no.
You don't want to go work full time for the agency, but you're welcome. Yeah, you'd love to give your input. Yeah,
this is somewhat like taxation without representation, because they're setting the rules and the regulations like they did with the ELD machines. Well, that made $2 billion for the industry that produces those machines, and they sold it as being a safety device, and I suggest that it's not safety, it's just money. There's a lot of issues that could be corrected and made a lot better if they would have some people, and let's face it, there's truckers out there that probably know a lot more than I do. Maybe they've forgot more than I know. I have no idea. But I know they're out there.
To its credit, to an extent, FMCSA has in fact made moves toward more direct engagement with those working actively in the industry through somewhat recent years, including through its Driver Advisory Subcommittee to its influential Motor Carrier Safety Advisory Committee, though neither have met recently. Yet there's also the Truck Leasing Task Force I wrote about a couple weeks back, dedicated to the singular issue of lease purchase contract inequities, as well as the Women of Trucking Advisory Board, both of those established after being required by Congress. Maybe, just maybe, it's time for a CSA SMS Advisory Committee, with plenty in the way of driver and owner-operator representation. Whatever the case, McCurdy hopes, I know, direct engagement continues to grow, with the ultimate result of a better system for owner-operators, drivers, and motor carriers. A big thanks to Warren McCurdy for his time for this episode. Overdrive Radio is out there on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn, most any podcasting platform. Subscribe to it so you don't miss an episode, and you can find me and all of our episodes via overdriveonline.com/overdrive-radio. Big thanks for listening. Overdrive Radio is a production of Overdrive, the voice of the American trucker. Considered and produced by me, Todd Dills, with the acoustic guitar and other support of trucker-songwriter Long Haul Paul Marhofer. The theme is Legend of the Snake Man by Marhofer, featuring the guitar work of Travis, the Snake Man himself, Ramick, Terry Two Socks Richardson on bass, keys by Tishomingo Jim Whitehead, and on drums, Andrew Marshall. The podcast is backed up further by Overdrive's own news editor Matt Cole, executive editor Alex Wackey, and video editors Lawson Rudisell and Andrew Gwynn. We'll see you next time.